Hello, we're live. Welcome to Dive into World Building. And today we are talking about where we sleep because that's a thing and it's a world building tool. And really, I had so much fun last week talking about the world building aspects of our topic that I wanted to see if we could focus a bit more on, the specific to fiction kind of aspects of the topic. But so let's start with some basics, right? Where we sleep. The answer to where we sleep is going to depend a great deal on who we are and what kind of species we belong to, I suppose, would be a really basic way to start. Also what our socioeconomic status is. But it also has a lot to do with our culture. And it's connected to our architecture.
Climate.
And our climate. So much like any topic on the show, you can pick some tiny detail of things and discover that it connects to everything else. So, yeah. And of course, what we call the place that we sleep is also going to be different depending on lots of different factors. So, I mean, I think, in fact, that you could go back and apply this question of how we talk about it to almost any topic in the entire archive of a Dive into World Building. How we talk about it and whether we talk about it.
Right.
And that last piece is just sort of a question of, well, is where you sleep something that you talk about? Because you might not want to talk about it, right? Certainly if there's shame associated to where you sleep in some way, or whether it's, or if it's considered too intimate to talk about where you sleep, you might not want to talk about it, right?
Yeah.
So if it's a spoiler at this point, the 12th Doctor Who, one of his early episodes, he observed a room that was made from nothing but a bed. That's all you do is you sleep in that room. It's a bedroom, and it puzzled him.
Well,
to have
an entire entirely to being asleep.
Yeah, just it really, he was baffled.
You're not going to do anything else in there.
I
mean, you could do other things in there, but if you have to do them in bed.
well, maybe
this is the guy with the angry eyebrows.
I can imagine you could have a culture where you have sexual relations is not the bed you sleep in, because that's just something your culture doesn't do.
That's interesting.
Where it's where you segregate those places. I could see a culture going along those lines. And the implication is like, oh my God, you had sex in your sleeping bed?
Would you do that? How terribly inappropriate.
I mean, you get like people from our culture or off planet or other dimensions doing that, and just like having a culture clash because you've run into weird culture. I mean, we have weird cultural mores that we don't think about all the time. And
Julia, what did I just say?
I know, but we're gonna go back. We're gonna back off of this.
Sorry, Morgan.
Response, but
I rejoined the.
We had agreed to sort of set that aside, Paul, but now that it's been out there, the elephant has now been acknowledged. We'll set it aside.
Okay, we'll set the aside and go into the actual role thing. Got it.
But it have to be another topic, I guess, though. Another dive for that topic. The adjacent discussion of where we have sex, but sleeping. Because really, sleeping is my thing right now. Is
okay.
Sleep. Sorry, Paul. I just.
This is what I get for showing up late.
It's fine.
It's okay. You've all seen Babylon 5?
Not all of us, but go for it.
Yeah.
So in Babylon 5, we find out that the Minbari do not sleep on their backs. They sleep at an angle because to sleep on the back is to invite death. So at one point, Captain Sheridan's on the Minbari ship and he can't sleep on this angled thing because he's afraid he's going to fall off. So, but that's a little bit of tiny world building. They're like, why do the Minbari have that way? Because they think it's to invite death. So you can world build elements of the culture is what kinds of beds or things that people sleep in.
We assume in the West, in our soft and supportive bed cultures, that everybody likes fluffy pillows and that we all sleep flat. And actually, there's a European tradition of sleeping sitting up in sort of bed closets that allowed you to sleep in a more confined space, that you didn't have to heat up the whole living space of the room. And so in many of those cases, they weren't designed for you to lie flat. They were designed for you to sit up slightly. So
absolutely. Yeah. And you can find them on the internet, these beautiful bed closets that are completely enclosed.
Yeah.
And very cool looking and made of wood, and it would be a lot easier for your body to heat up the enclosed space than it would be for your body to heat up an entire room. So,
which is great if where you're sleeping is an environment where if you didn't do that, you'd get cold. If you're in a climate where that doesn't happen, where the ambient temperature is suited to your.
Well, so ventilation preferences vary a lot. And
yes,
whether or not it's okay to have things blowing on you at night is a whole different thing. So, yeah.
There are there's whether they're going to be species needs and personal needs that are physical and emotional needs that will vary. Because if you're claustrophobic, the closet beds are going to be difficult. And you might find yourself surprised if you're traveling and you end up with a group that sleeps out in the open and suddenly you can sleep.
Absolutely.
There's also up a tree in sort of what do you use for padding, and how hard should a bed be? What are pillows like? And this is just going from humans. And also, do your offspring co-sleep with you?
Yes, that was one of the things I had written down to bring up. So
that one's a big fight.
It is.
It's a big fight, and in this country, we try to legislate it, or at least we get all sorts of people involved in it.
Yep.
And whether or not your offspring each have their own beds, all of these things become very culturally relevant. As opposed to cultures that expect that everybody doesn't sleep alone, as opposed to sleeping with somebody else is only for really intimate relationships. And then there's the whole concept of people did you see the thing recently where the guy was considered completely off kilter because he tweeted that he doesn't have a side of his bed with his partner, that they swap off, isn't
that funny?
And it became this big thing. So he said that many people
my
have
side
a
of the
side
bed
of the bed.
Your side of the bed.
And then he said he didn't do that. And people just reacted with shock and revulsion, saying, how does that even work? And people were saying, but I have all my stuff piled up on the bedside table of my stuff. And he just said, I don't know, we just shifted around. And then it got worse because he mentioned that he and his partner don't have a my side of the dining table thing going on, my seat at the table. And so people really freaked out. But, you know, there's an assumption amongst many people that there are set seats that you sit in and the set place that you sleep in, that you always sleep in that side of the bed. And for some people I know, it's, you know, have to be closer to the door or the window. So if your bed is oriented in a different place, they can sleep in a different place relative to the bed, but in a sort of absolute position relative to the geography of the room.
Yeah.
And then there's
or like nearer the bathroom, for example.
Right. And then there's have to have your head aligned in a particular axis or in a particular orientation, or like headed north or something.
Or and this has been personally relevant. If you're going to a hotel room, the side of the bed that you sleep on, or depends on, or that my husband and I sleep on, depends on which side of the bed has the more accessible outlet for his CPAP.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, there are species that that co-sleep with their children. Horses.
What were you saying? Children and horses?
No, the young horses and adult horses.
Oh,
I see. I mean, they're all sleep in the same place, right?
Sleeping with horses? What? This is new. But I mean, you could totally do it.
Do you sleep with your pets or not?
Do you sleep with your pets or not? Yeah, I fall asleep with my pets.
I mean, there are people who would consider it horrifying to do so, or to not do so can arouse some very, very strong emotions in people. And it's very culturally variable. But if you tell people that, there's a whole lot of reaction of, wow, you monster. It's really fascinating watching that happen.
Yeah.
So we've got sorry, I'm not as focused as I thought I was going to be.
That's okay. That's okay.
So the things that you think about when you're building a world, or, you know, what do your people look like? Are they humans, or are they some other shape?
Bats.
How? Oh yeah.
Are they
That's a great
bats?
example.
That would be awesome. I want to see people. Hey, welcome to my home. Here's the rail. Oh wait, that's not how you sleep.
I have a multi-species cafe where there's a whole range of resting options for various different sorts of people. And how do you make it modular so that you can have a group of different need people to sit with each other? So
yeah,
sounds cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where if it were visual storytelling, it would be much easier to just show it. Putting that into words is a great challenge, because some people really love writing long descriptive passages, and that when I'm writing, it's often a complaint. People say, well, I can't envision it in my head.
Yeah.
And there's a difference between a certain kind of narrative that allows you to literally recreate the scenario, you know, in detailed miniature in your head, versus a much more, I don't know, experiential view that doesn't show everything, right? And but anyway, in that context, I've had to figure out how to write that. Who is there? What do they need? And how did we accommodate everything? And so, yeah, bats.
Yeah, bats. That's cool.
Bats.
Yeah.
And you know what? One of the things we haven't mentioned yet, is how long do people have to sleep?
Or even if they need to, it's like, why do they need to sleep?
Why do they need to sleep? Yes, but like, I mean, you can have a species that just sleeps for 3 hours.
Elves.
You know.
Yeah.
Or we believe right now that a good night's sleep is one uninterrupted stretch, and we keep finding suggestions that never seem to stick, because I keep seeing the Atlas Obscura or somebody saying, amazing, in the past some cultures had a midnight thing that people would get up and wander around, and then you see the same story show up again in 6 months or something. Oh, it's amazing, we just discovered this thing.
Yeah, I've seen it at least 3 times.
Yeah. But how long you sleep at a time, and how much sleep you get in a different a given
cycle?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Would that, like, for example, would that change your architecture? If you slept for less of the day, would you have a, dedicated room for sleeping, or, dedicated room for mostly sleeping? or would you just have little nooks here and there? I don't know, but there would be various different ways to approach it.
Well, I think it would depend partly on whether or not you need a particular shape piece of furniture for it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, also, if you need a bed for 3 hours, it doesn't. If you need a bed, it doesn't matter if you need it for 3 hours or 8 hours, because it takes up a certain amount of space.
Yeah.
If you can sleep in a chair.
It actually, okay, yes, but it also depends on how often you need it and when. Like, because in Japan, you get up and then you put away the bed in the closet, and sometimes, obviously not just traditional beds. Sometimes, but like if you're using futons, you can just put them away, and then the room gets used for something else for, most of the day.
So, there's also the issue of how much privacy do you expect when you're sleeping, and how much do you need, and is it really also, is everybody sleeping the same amount of time? Is it age or gender or whatever other markers segregated? And is your being more or less alert than conscious moments while asleep, assuming we have sleep? Because I can easily imagine that you have a world that you've constructed where the particular, I guess we're going to say species, considers the time of sleep a better time for sentries, because they have a certain kind of sleep mode that's more alert to little noises, but that's okay. And because when you're awake, you're expected to be focused on a thing, and you're not as likely to be alert. I mean, just to throw out a weird twist that people wouldn't expect.
Yeah.
And how does this
which reminds me that it's also sleeping at home versus sleeping away from home, whether you're in, I'm going to say, military service or hunting, or whatever takes you away from home for an extended period of time. In the military, you sleep.
So adjusting to an unfamiliar sleeping place.
Yeah. Or something. What Kat's remark about sentries made me think of that, because your sleep pattern might be different, because if you've got 4 on, 4 off, if somebody's always got to be awake enough or asleep enough to for safety.
Well, I mean, we also assume that home is a place where you don't need that kind of sentry. So,
well, yes.
What kind of world have you created?
Yeah.
Yep.
Here's a thought.
Hi, Kate.
Hello.
So we talked about sleep and environments, and about temperature. What about light versus darkness? And what if the amount of sleep you need really doesn't correspond well with the length of the day or night on the planet that you're living on? How do you as a culture deal with that or have developed ways to deal with the fact, well, or like, for example, to give a real life example, Charlie Jane Andrews, The City in the Middle of the Night, the cities are sitting in a perpetual twilight zone where the sun never sets. So how do you develop your society or your building to deal with the fact that it never does get dark?
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, that's something that people deal with up in the Arctic during the summer, right?
Yeah. Also, I'm thinking about all the ways that the JPL and NASA people had to deal with being on Mars missions because of the difference between a Martian day and an Earthly day.
Oh, the migrating schedules. Yeah, I heard about that. Yeah.
So, I mean, we already cope with jet lag, and we find it kind of difficult, and we don't have a good solution for it. We mostly have superstitious rituals. I'm sorry. Aversive ritual. That is the word I've decided to use instead of superstition because I feel like it's a weighted word. But yeah, I have also been noting that we customarily assume that the day is divided into certain kinds of segments as we write about our world building, and I keep struggling with what I say about time measurements.
Yeah.
Because even if somebody's dividing the day into different sorts of divisions, it's still based on an earthly day, all of our human languages. And so what happens when you go out into space? Well, I've kind of looked at, as we were already saying, what do you do on boats? Because there's always a need to have crew on. And it's interesting when people are single-handing across an ocean, for instance, and they're in a small vessel, they need to worry about ending up in shipping lanes or whales or other things like that. And so people adapt their sleeping habits in all sorts of fascinating ways to try to cope with that.
Yeah, and the International Space Station, they have what, 20-something sunrises and sunsets a day?
Yeah.
So there's been a lot of people writing about, I mean, Kim Stanley Robinson, his entire Mars trilogy, they do it in sols. And you've got your 2.5 hours of dead time that doesn't correspond with Earth time. And the further you get away from that, the more changes that will be. And we haven't talked about either about the amount of illumination you're getting from your primary and what that's going to do, because that changes how human bodies as well. Because circadian rhythms they'll change, but you have to really think about how far you're going to try and push that.
Yeah. And if you're not talking about humans, are the people you're talking about, are they nocturnal, or are they diurnal, or do they need to sleep in the spaces in between?
The crepuscular and twilight hours.
That's it.
Crepuscular, there you go.
Crepuscular, there's a great word.
That's the word.
So there's also, is this person time shifted from their cultural expectations, or do their cultural expectations have space for lots of different people? We live in a very lark dominating culture, except in the corners of it that are very night owl dominated. And there's a whole lot of cultural baggage we have around all that. I was just reading somebody, I think it was Adam Kelly. I've lost the rest of his name right now. I'm sorry, Adam. Who was writing about the fact that some cultural researchers and elders believe that or maybe it's not a belief, maybe it's just a fact, that the Pacific people often started the day at moonrise and not with sunrise, and that activities were done by moonlight because that would be when fish would be active and all these other things, and that the daylight hours were for resting. And so even amongst humans, we have some assumptions that things should start at dawn and go on until sundown, but that's not necessarily the way that humans have always handled this.
Yeah.
Because it depends so much on what you're supposed to be doing when you're awake.
Climate needs all sorts of things, you know, siesta, right? And
Yeah.
so even the conversation we're having assumes a certain normativity that I think that just amongst humans doesn't exist. Also, how many hours are babies supposed to sleep?
Oh God,
No,
more than we do.
People have all kinds of ideas about how babies sleep because of that phrase, sleep like a baby. But no.
No. Well, actually, a baby should sleep as though it knows if it needs something, it will get something. If it needs, food or comfort or a change in clothing or, whatever the things that the baby needs. Baby should sleep as though it knows those things will happen. But, that doesn't actually mean sleeping and it's scheduled.
I mean, a lot of how long a baby sleeps has to do with how large its stomach is.
Right.
And if a baby's stomach is really small and it cannot, ingest a lot of food at once, then it tends to get hungry and wake up and want food more often.
Yeah. We also tend to adjust our understanding of what sleeping through the night means.
Mm-hmm.
When I was talking about, when our baby first slept, started doing what we called sleeping through the night, it was 5 hours. With 5 hours of sleep, and that was, if you can function on 5 hours of sleep, that's you take it as a win.
Yep.
Well, and there's some evidence that for like medieval cultures, they would actually go to sleep at sundown, which would be 5 o'clock in the winter, but then they'd wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning and be up for a few hours and then go back to sleep.
Oh, we're back to that again. See, it works when you go to sleep earlier.
Well, yeah, because if you were going to sleep earlier, that would make more sense.
Yeah.
I also wonder how many of the people that have trouble sleeping at night are also the people who really could use a nap after lunch. And whether it's just that their bodies are really in distress and rebellion against the imposition of a different body clock.
That's possible.
Yeah, and there's also people who can't go to sleep at night and also can't nap, because I would be one of them. Another reason I don't have kids, actually.
Oh, dear.
We need lots of different kinds of people in a community to make it function. Mm-hmm. If everybody got up at the same time and everybody went to sleep at the same time and everybody was good at the same things and bad at the same things, we would all be dead.
Yeah, that pretty much covers it.
Yes.
I'm sorry, that's the end of Dive in the World Building. We're done.
But it's making me try to be coherent, and that's not. It might not be dark enough out yet for me to be coherent. Because I'm thinking that the being active during the day and being active the way people who are involved with other human beings, if you go out and you go shopping or you go to work or you go socialize with people, there's a whole lot of stimulants that, stimulation going on there. There's voices and colors and sounds and smells and multiple conversations and lights and if you're alone at night, there's a whole lot less going on.
Yep.
And it's easier to not be overwhelmed.
Interesting, yeah.
Probably make that personal. If I'm home alone at night, there's a whole lot less going on, and it's easier for me to not be overwhelmed with all of the sights that aren't there, all of the sounds that aren't there, all of the smells and things, the energy that you find going out during the day with the world happening around you.
Actually, that takes me back to the idea of sensory stimuli during sleep, which I think is interesting because some people can sleep through large amounts of noise and other people can't. And the other thing is, what textures are we expecting when we sleep?
Textures.
Textures?
Yeah. Like
how firm is your pillow?
Covers, what kind of covers or not do you have? Right? Are you able to sleep if you don't have weight on you, for example?
Blankets.
If you have a fuzzy blanket on you, that's a condition under which
rough blankets.
You have to have a sheet on you.
Or you have a security blanket.
Or if it's really warm, can you sleep without a blanket at all or a sheet?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, it's annoying, but I can't sleep without a blanket, and that is really can get unpleasant in the summertime.
Yep.
This is why in the tropics we have cotton blankets that are very loose weave, so that they are just enough to have some weight and some warmth, but not so much that you can't sleep in a humid environment. So, and these are regional adaptations that can get lost when people move. Diaspora and immigrant and forced resettlement and migration and refugees and all these other things. What's culturally relevant is usually very deeply tied to the climate that the culture originated in.
Yep.
And in migrating to a different place, you can lose or not have an idea of what is actually useful for the climate of that place. But for instance, Korean winters are very, very cold. So there's a thing that people call a mink blanket, which these days tends to be made with synthetics. But it's a very, very heavy plush blanket that is apparently traditional for that region.
Interesting.
I think a lot of my friends think of quilts as very international, and they are as an art form now. But quilting things is a specific kind of technology for dealing with climate and temperature needs and sleeping. So
well, and then just to extend that a little bit, do we sleep with clothes? And why?
And what does it look like?
Because there are sock people and you cannot wear sock people and like all sorts of stuff.
Yep.
Do you need to wear a hat to sleep?
Yeah.
Or a blindfold.
That used to be very common. Now it's much less common, or at least in the US it used to be common.
Well, I mean, if you have a cold place, it's really a way of keeping your body temperature together. So
yep.
Earplugs are another thing. And how different are your sleeping clothes from your waking clothes?
Yeah.
And can you go
talking about socioeconomically? Do you have the money to have an entire different set of clothes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are you allowed to be seen in that you were sleeping in?
Is this before
this is slightly different, but before after what?
College.
When do these rules get bent? I guess is a good question, right?
Can you actually?
Well, and who are they bent for? Children can wear pretty much anything.
Oh, I don't know. My children have specific pajama days at school.
Yeah.
Oh, I meant like younger than that, like hand carried children. Although there's a huge difference in are they required to wear shoes? Because here, even children
do you wear shoes to bed?
Yeah. No, children who don't walk are required to wear shoes here. In California, not.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Oh yeah, no, I've been in places where like parents who allow their children to have bare feet in public get chided.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Tim got told off once for for having no shoes on one of our kids, but he was like, "What?" Welcome to California.
Oh no, I had somebody threaten that if I didn't cover my child's feet, they were going to call Child Protective Services on me, and I was like, "What?"
What?
On what grounds?
People get really, really just nosy about other people's children.
They do.
Yeah.
That is a topic for another day, but yeah.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. But we used to take our kid to Friday night services. We would put them in their pajamas before services. We'd go there, when they were like a year and a half, 2 years old, and younger, because, well, and actually about that stage, because it is much easier to take a sleeping child who's already dressed for bed out of a car, carry it upstairs and put it in its bed than it is to take a sleeping child who is not dressed for sleeping and wrestle it into sleeping clothes.
Yeah, the old
Yeah, there are people here who know that.
That makes sense.
The age at which a child is allowed to be out in jammies versus not is slightly traumatizing for those of us who are used to taking our children out and about with us. And so I was taking I think they were 3 and 5 at the time. I took my children to a folk event that started late-ish, and they danced to the beginning of the concert, and then they found, because it was at a pub or like a cafe, they found a place to curl up and go to sleep. Mm-hmm. But people were outraged. And my children were really happy because they got to dance to music at the beginning, and then they got to, to be there, and I got to be there, and I didn't have to leave. And there is a certain cultural standard that says that somebody, notably a female parent usually, must be supervising the child while they are sleeping.
Mm-hmm. You need to have a
cultures that say, as opposed to people who say, children are capable of rousing themselves and coming back. Now, I understand there's some significant reasons why people have these beliefs or these reactions, but it is interesting that they are not universal.
Mm-hmm.
So, you have to feed a child is universal. Where the child has to sleep is not universal. But
yes.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to figure out how pillows end up being so different.
Oh gosh, they're very different too. They're buckwheat pillows, and they're feather pillows, and they're synthetic pillows, and they're wooden pillows, and
stiff pillows versus where does the pillow go in relation to your neck and your head?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How many pillows?
What shape should the pillow be?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And do other species have head supports when they're sleeping? Do they need them?
Yeah. Well.
Or do they need to support something else? And have you ever watched a giraffe sleeping?
I've never watched a giraffe sleeping.
I just saw a graphic, an image of a giraffe sleeping, and it's on the ground with its torso on, it's the main trunk of its body on the ground, and its neck looped around to be on the ground. So the head is on the ground next to their body, because there's a whole lot of neck management going on there.
That would say.
Yeah.
It was an astonishing image. I'd never thought about it.
This is... Yep. Google images, giraffe sleeping. Mm-hmm. Wow.
There's actually a huge amount of physical changes that had to happen to that animal to make it be able to do that, including its heart is outsized. They have special arteries and veins in their neck, and just, it's
giraffes are amazing.
Cool stuff.
But here's another question. What do you do with your tail when you're sleeping?
What do you do with your beard when you're sleeping?
That's a whole different thing. Yeah.
You know, I do. I have really long hair, so I do a lot of hair management when I'm sleeping.
Mm-hmm.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm learning CPAP versus hair management right now, and it's going okay, but wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
You have Velcro on your
It's
strap
tube
there?
versus hair.
Yeah,
well,
you can't be on either of them.
there's also car door versus hair.
Yeah,
I haven't met that one yet.
Yeah, no, I got my hair down to longer than it is right now, and I had car door versus hair. That was exciting.
Oh dear.
Also, seat versus hair.
Oh yeah, that I get.
Oh, there's just everything versus hair. Okay, it just.
Well, okay. There are even more. There are even more things that we're not going to get into about versus hair. But yeah,
let's go
back to sleep.
hair.
That's another.
do one on hair.
Well, so we haven't really touched on the I mean, we've mentioned beds and we've mentioned futons, but we haven't really talked about other kinds of sleeping spots like nests or pillow forts, hammocks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking about the fact that, you know, if you're looking at living in space and you're trying to do it using the least amount of resources for the most amount of people don't live alone anymore. So it's sort of like, what kind of dormitory barrack would be set up for sleeping, and how would that change how families are structured? Because you may not have a separate domicile. There may be, you know, communal children raising and things like that.
Well, I mean, so for example, you would probably expect that if people are working in shifts, they would be sleeping in shifts, and you might not have use of the bed for particular hours of the day. Somebody else might be using it.
Hot bunking.
Hot bunking is a really emotionally laden thing. For people who have grown up in a your bed is your private castle culture. So the question is, do you have a sense of privacy and placehood in that culture?
It feels like that might be related to you know, how much variation is there. So you have, you know, a family of 5 people, and how much variation is in their sleeping needs, you know, in terms of the objects that they need to sleep. Because if you need to have a particular blanket and it's different from the blanket that everybody else used, you'll develop an attachment to that blanket and maybe to that space. So if you personalize your space,
so
then
the
it's
way
gonna be
that
harder.
But if you have your own blanket and you have your own pillow, that could always go in a locker.
Yeah, that's true.
Are you reforming your bed materials every night to go beyond the futon concept too, as long as we're doing skiffy things or we're talking about, you know, tromping in the forest fantasies?
Yep.
How much time do you need to put together for, you know, are we going to be like gorillas and chimps and have to make ourselves a nest?
Yep.
Or, you know, I'm going, well, what if your species is loosely based on fish? or an octopus, you know. It's
Yeah.
Oh, you know, you sort of wedge yourself in a crack.
Yeah.
I have one of those. I never got to the part where they were sleeping.
Well, and you know, I think, like, don't they in the space station Velcro themselves to the wall?
Yeah, the sleeping bags are Velcroed to the wall. Well, and this takes me back to the coloring, or it's not a coloring book, but it's just a really brightly child-looking book called All Tomorrows, I think, or All Yesterdays. And it's about dinosaurs when they're not rending gobbets of flesh. And so, what did T-Rex look like when it was sleeping?
Oh, what do chickens look like when you're sleeping?
So chickens, you know, we talk about roosting, right? And and sort of
that's
the
it.
classic bird look of being on a branch and fluffed up and all of this. I'm having trouble envisioning a fluffed up T-Rex, but now I'm realizing that I don't know how an ostrich sleeps.
Yeah, that's true.
They sit down.
In teams.
And some birds
Standing tends to
have
have
feet that grasp when they sleep.
right.
Oh, right. There's a whole word for that too. Yeah. So, and that's another one of the, the Earth basically had a slightly longer day. So I'm assuming that sort of came into that too. But they, filled all of the niches. So somebody did something. Somebody did everything.
Mm-hmm. Ostriches have that same neck issue. Only apparently they stretch them out.
I'm seeing a thing that looks like a hairy ottoman with like a neck snake coming out of it.
That's a very good description, actually.
That is a sleeping ostrich or related.
Yeah, I've just seen an image of an emu sleeping.
Something with a 120-foot neck.
Yeah, how do you even do that?
Yeah, how did they sleep? I wonder.
Have any of them been preserved in the sleeping position?
How would we know?
This is what I want, Like, how did this happen? So.
Well, bedrooms were a little few and far between at the time. So yeah, I mean, in Pompeii we have some people who were sleeping, right?
Yes.
There's a degree of evidence that they might have been sleeping as opposed to doing other things.
Yeah. Let's go back to the space station for a second, and a multi-species space station. If you need different environments for sleeping and for working. What if you have a species that needs that the working environment is very similar to the sleeping environment of someone else, and vice versa? Do they just trade spaces when they change what they're doing?
So you're saying that there's a species that likes to sleep on tables, and so they sleep in the restaurant when the restaurant's closed.
I was more thinking of nocturnal and diurnal, and you want to sleep in a cave, but yeah. Again, I think we're back to that whole concept of ownership and privacy and sense of invasion, and a lot of creatures have a very territorial sense of, no, my sleeping space has to be safe, so it can't be invaded.
It's a very vulnerable time for anyone. I mean, you're closing your eyes, you're shutting out the outside world. It's evolutionarily logical to want to be protected.
Yep.
Yeah, unless you're a dolphin.
I guess the rule.
But yeah, no, it is, and so yeah, we do tend to, go to ground and be somewhere that is enclosed. Now I'm thinking human kennels.
Well, my mom don't have that
don't get political.
Sleep in a locked place.
A locked place?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it was her argument for really preferring not to sleep in tents. But the Vanagon camper was okay.
Okay.
But I think that controlling egress in a disciplined and systematic manner was very important due to this particular concern.
Yeah. Pop-up tents, because we were talking about taking your bedding and stashing it in a locker.
Yep.
Sort of, you had
the tent comes with that concept of privacy in its own interesting way.
Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting because once you start talking about the question of privacy, it gets really complicated if you have very sensorially different aliens around.
I can see through the wall. I know what you're doing.
Right, exactly. I'm thinking privacy, what one species perceives as privacy may not be as private as they think to another species.
Yeah, because we have fairly dull senses compared to the rest of the animals that we live on this planet with. So yeah, they know what's happening from the smell 5 rooms away.
So here's a question. Do you reconfigure the wall of that particular space on the ship so that it is suitable for the privacy needs of a species? Or do you say, well, just deal with it?
No, you issue sensory sunglasses and earplug equivalents.
Well,
I'm being ridiculous.
It might also depend on how easy it is to reconfigure the wall. Because if you're talking, about nanoparticles.
Now I'm finding now we have the spaceship cozy mystery.
Well, I mean,
spaceship what?
The spaceship cozy mystery.
It's a spaceship cozy mystery.
Oh my god. That's what I just realized that's what.
Is that what you're writing?
Apparently. So she wakes up, she doesn't know where she is, why she's here. She's missing one of her shuttles, and one of her crew is missing. And and I've got this mystery I have to fix, and I don't know how to fix it.
Okay, well, I've just created your elevator pitch blurb for you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think I'm grateful.
Oh my goodness, this is what Dive into World Building is for.
Okay. Excuse me, I gotta make a note.
You do that.
So,
it's kind of awesome, though.
I'm trying to think about what else. Sleeping elevated as opposed to sleeping in a lower place. We definitely have a difference, and like even in cultures that like just sleep on a shelf of some sort, kinds of things, and also how much overhead space do you need, and the idea of what's claustrophobic, like I find it okay if I'm in really, really tight bed sheets, like wrapped into the bed really tight. And so some people will rip everything off and have really loose. Sorry, Morgan.
Yeah,
really loose stuff going on. But but if the ceiling is too low, that makes me feel claustrophobic in a way that being confined doesn't. And so, and then I have a thing about wrinkles. Like some people really love their nightgowns and things, and I'm like, wrinkles. Wrinkles make me bananas.
Well, I mean, that's back to the clothes question. I stopped wearing nightgowns because I couldn't stand the way they twisted.
Oh God.
Well, and there are other ways that we could go with this. I mean, you could be hamsters and have just a pile of leaf litter that you burrow into.
Yeah.
In stereo.
And here's the question: does it have to be a specific pile in a specific location?
I must sleep in the specific cedar of my people.
Now we've evolved beavers and having to play night Jenga to build your bed.
Or do you have to refresh it every so often, or is it the older cedar the better?
I need to ask my daughter about her rabbits.
Also,
you need to hit the hay.
We're back to Odo and his bucket.
Yeah, Odo.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And,
well, you guys know what "hit the hay" expression comes from, right?
That is literally from hay-filled ricks, isn't it?
Well, so the mattresses were made out of hay, over ropes.
Layers of fabric,
right? And they would get full of bugs. Yeah. So what you would do is there are actually beds that have a piece of the bed that you can actually like dissociate. It's like a big old rolling pin kind of thing. and you actually whack the hay with it to get the bugs out before you go to bed.
How does it get the bugs out? I'm a little
Well, it
confused.
kind of knocks some of them out at least, or at least sort of pushes them further down in the hay.
Are we sure this isn't apocryphal? This sounds a bit fantastic.
This is, well, I don't know. This was told to me in a place where there was such a bed by a docent. So
okay,
I mean, could be apocryphal.
I'm looking this up.
Do it. Look it up.
I suppose if you hit it and the bugs are alive, they'll leave.
Maybe.
And if they're not, they won't. But they also won't be biting you. I really don't want to sleep now.
Oh, dear.
We didn't even talk about the rhyme.
Uh-huh.
Because
Which one?
Sleep tight.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, hitting the hay is not going to do anything for those.
Yeah.
This is really sounding like folk etymology to me. I'm sorry.
It could be.
I will go look.
It could be.
But
maybe we will just file it under people have legends about beds.
I can easily believe that instead of being for whacking the bugs out, it was for like getting the lumps out or redistributing the shallow bits.
Yeah, that's what I would have thought.
Or creating a shallow bit.
Or just evening things out.
I mean, those all seem much more plausible.
International says,
right? It sounds more plausible to me that it was about redistributing stuffing than it was about bugs.
I'm looking at a pretty decent Google search, and they all say the same thing.
What do they say? That it
before they went to bed, they would literally hit the hay to make the mattress more comfortable and to make sure there were no bugs inside. It also is the origin of hit the sack, because the sack is what is stuffed with hay.
Well, maybe it makes you feel better to think that perhaps a bug or two have been knocked out.
This doesn't have to be one or the other.
Right.
I mean, could also, if you've got mice nesting in your bed, they might also choose to leave if you start eating the bed.
And mice would live there because they will live anywhere.
Even if they're cats. Depends on the cat, but
yeah.
Well, guys, it's 7 minutes after 5. We got a little carried away here.
We have to put this up on the bed.
Right.
But thank you all for being here and for engaging on the topic. I'm glad you all could make it. Again, I do not have a plan for next week, but we will get there. And I will stop the broadcast for now. Bye. Thanks for making this so entertaining.